Be Me, 38, a life coach and a published author. Living my best life in a minimalist apartment that I've curated to be my personal sanctuary. Everything is clean, white, and intentional. No clutter, physical or emotional. I'm a single mom, by choice. Well, technically the divorce was his idea, but I came to see it as a liberation. My daughter, Maya, is 11. She's bright, intuitive, and I've spent her entire life trying to arm her with the tools to navigate a world designed by men, for men. It's a full-time job on top of my actual full-time job. The co-parenting arrangement is the one wrinkle in my otherwise orderly existence. Every other weekend, Maya goes to her father's place. Let's call him Dean. Dean is simple. He runs an auto repair shop, a place that always smells of grease and burnt coffee. He's not a bad man, just a relic, a walking embodiment of the quiet, stoic masculinity that my work is dedicated to deconstructing. Our marriage ended because I evolved, and he stayed the same. I was reading, growing, attending seminars, and building a brand around female empowerment. He was content to come home, fix a leaky faucet, and watch sports. We were speaking different languages. I speak the language of emotional intelligence and self-actualization. He speaks the language of torque wrenches and fan belts. It was never going to work. But for Maya's sake, I maintain a civil, if distant, relationship. I drop her off on Friday, pick her up on Sunday, and we communicate via a court-mandated app for scheduling. It's functional. A few months ago, maybe late summer, Maya's tablet stopped charging. It was one of those expensive ones, a gift from her grandmother. I tried all the usual tricks. Different cables, different outlets, the old turn it off and on again routine. Nothing. The screen remained stubbornly black. Maya was upset, naturally. That thing was her connection to her friends. I saw it as a teachable moment. I sat her down and explained that we shouldn't form unhealthy attachments to material possessions. I told her this was an opportunity to learn about impermanence. She just stared at me with those big, serious eyes of hers. I told her we could look into getting a new one, something from a more ethically minded company. The subject was closed, I thought. The following weekend was her weekend with Dean. As she was packing her bag, she picked up the dead tablet. She asked if she could take it with her. I asked why she'd want to carry around a useless piece of electronics. She just said she wanted to show her dad. I didn't think anything of it. Let him see it. He'd tell her the same thing I did. It's broken, get a new one. So I let her pack it. Friday came. I drove her over to his house. It's a small bungalow on the other side of town, with a detached 2-car garage that serves as his personal workshop. The place always gives me a headache. There are tools everywhere, half-finished projects on workbenches, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and solvent, the opposite of my carefully controlled environment. Dean came out to the car. He was wearing his usual uniform of oil-stained jeans and a faded t-shirt. He gave me a polite, non-committal nod. He never was one for words. That was part of the problem. You never knew what he was thinking. Just this. Silence. Maya jumped out and gave him a hug. She always seemed so happy to see him, which I tried to view as a positive thing. She immediately showed him the dead tablet. From the car, I could see him take it, turn it over in his big calloused hands. He squinted at the charging port, then said something to her I couldn't hear. She nodded, and they went inside. I drove away feeling a familiar mix of pity and relief. Pity for him, stuck in his world of physical objects and simple problems. Relief that it wasn't my world anymore. The weekend passed quietly. I worked on a new series of blog posts about dismantling the myth of the male provider. I did some yoga. I drank my green juice. I enjoyed the silence. Sunday evening arrived. Time to retrieve my daughter from the cave. I pulled up to his house right on time. Maya came running out before I could even turn off the engine. She was beaming. In her hands was the tablet, and the screen was on, bright and fully functional. She hopped into the passenger seat, bubbling with excitement. "Dad fixed it. He fixed it." I felt a strange, cold knot forming in my stomach. It wasn't supposed to be fixable. I had declared it a lost cause. "How?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She launched into a detailed explanation that made my eyes glaze over. Something about the charging port being bent and one of the solder points coming loose. Apparently, he had a special magnifying glass and some kind of tiny soldering iron. He'd taken the entire thing apart on his workbench. He'd shown her all the little components inside, what each of them did, the processor, the memory, the battery. She said it was like a tiny city. She hadn't just watched him. He had let her help, showing her how to handle the delicate ribbon cables. She was practically vibrating with pride. We drove in silence for a few minutes while I processed this. He hadn't just fixed it. He had turned it into a lesson in his world. He had undermined my teachable moment about letting go and replaced it with his own about brute force repair. I had to frame this correctly. "Well," I said, choosing my words carefully, "it's nice that your father has a little hobby to keep him busy." Maya frowned. "It's not a hobby, Mom. It's what he does. He fixes things." "Yes, I know," I said, "but in a complex society, we have specialists. We support our community by paying trained professionals. It's how a healthy economy functions." I was trying to explain the macro view, to lift her out of the weeds of nuts and bolts. She was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. Then she dropped the bomb, the sentence that would tilt my entire world off its axis. She turned to me, her expression completely serious, and said, "You know, Mom, when I grow up, I want to marry a man like Dad." The car felt like it had suddenly plunged into ice water. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I must have heard her wrong. "What did you just say?" My voice was thin, sharp. She didn't flinch. "I want a husband who knows how to do things, who can fix stuff when it breaks, instead of just talking about it." Betrayal. It was a physical sensation, hot and sharp, right in the center of my chest. 11 years. 11 years of careful instruction. 11 years of building her up to be an independent woman who would never need to rely on a man for anything. And it was all undone in one weekend, with a tiny screwdriver and a soldering iron. I didn't say another word for the rest of the drive home. The silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. When we got back to the apartment, the pristine white walls felt like they were closing in on me. Maya went to her room, probably to use her newly resurrected toy. I stood in the middle of my living room, shaking with a rage so pure it was almost paralyzing. This was not just a childish comment. This was an act of sabotage. Dean knew exactly what he was doing. This was his way of fighting back, of asserting his primitive worldview into my daughter's mind. He was poisoning her, filling her head with outdated patriarchal nonsense about men being fixers and women being... what? The admirers? The damsels in distress with the broken tablets? I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling on the screen. I found his contact and hit call. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, infuriatingly so. "Jocelyn? What did you do?" I practically spat the words out. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me, Dean. You and Maya, the tablet. You think I don't see what you're doing?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. Probably some stupid sports game. "I fixed her tablet," he said slowly, as if talking to a child. "She asked me to." "You indoctrinated her." I was pacing now, my voice getting louder. "She came home talking about wanting a husband who can fix things. A husband like you, after everything I've taught her." "Jocelyn, she's 11. She was just happy her toy was working again." His condescension was like gasoline on a fire. "No, This is how it starts. With these little things, you're programming her to value traditional male roles, to see men as providers of practical solutions. You are actively undermining my parenting. I'm her parent, too, he said, his voice hardening for the first time, and I'm going to teach her what I know. That includes how to be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient? I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You call making a little girl dependent on a man's ability to fix her gadgets self-sufficient. I'm teaching her to be intellectually and emotionally self-sufficient, to lead, not to follow some guy with a toolbox. Okay, Jocelyn, I'm not doing this. Oh, yes, you are. From now on, your visits will be supervised. I'm not letting you fill her head with this toxic 1950s garbage anymore. I hung up before he could respond. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt righteous. I was a mother protecting her child. I had drawn a line in the sand. The next day, I put my plan into action. Operation Deprogram Maya. I started by calling Dean's sister to inform her that for the foreseeable future, I would be exercising my right to ensure Maya's emotional and philosophical well-being during visitation. She was silent for a moment, then told me I was being ridiculous. Typical. The whole family was trapped in the same backwards mindset. I informed Maya that her next weekend with her father was canceled. I told her we were going to have a mommy-daughter emotional wellness retreat at home. The look on her face was one of sullen disappointment, proof that the poison was already taking hold. That weekend, I curated a special curriculum for her. We started with a documentary about pioneering female CEOs. Maya slumped on the couch, scrolling through her tablet the entire time. I made her listen to a podcast I admired, one hosted by a woman who had traveled the world alone. Maya put in her earbuds after 10 minutes and listened to her own music. Every attempt I made to engage her with stories of powerful, independent women was met with a wall of adolescent indifference. It was infuriating. It was like he had installed some kind of firewall against my influence. I realized I needed a different approach. I had been telling her. Now, I needed to show her. I needed a practical demonstration of female competence and independence. The following week, the perfect opportunity presented itself. I had been wanting a new bookshelf for my office for a while. I decided I would buy a flat-pack one, and we would build it together. It would be the perfect metaphor. We, two strong women, would construct something useful and beautiful with our own hands. We didn't need a man. We were the architects of our own lives and our own furniture. I ordered one online, a chic, minimalist design. It arrived a few days later in a long, heavy box. I dragged it into the living room with a grunt. That Saturday, I announced the start of our project. Today, Maya, I said with a flourish, we are going to build a bookshelf. She looked up from her tablet, unimpressed. Don't you just call a guy for that? My eye twitched. That is precisely the attitude we are going to dismantle today. We are the guys. Now come on. I sliced open the box with a kitchen knife. The contents spilled out onto my clean floor, a dozen or so white panels of varying sizes, and a bewildering assortment of screws, dowels, and tiny metal bits in a plastic bag. And the instructions. A single multi-folded sheet of paper covered in cryptic, wordless diagrams. No problem. I was a smart, capable woman. I could decipher this. It was just a logic puzzle. Okay, I said, trying to project an aura of confident competence. First, we identify all the parts. An hour later, we were still identifying the parts. The diagrams were useless. Panel A looked identical to Panel F. The screws labeled C3 were indistinguishable from the ones labeled D8. The whole system was intentionally obscure, clearly designed by men to make women feel incompetent. I could write a whole seminar on the patriarchal design of flat-pack furniture instructions. Maya had given up about 30 minutes in, and was now lying on the couch, watching me struggle. Her silent judgment was worse than any criticism. "Why don't you look at the big picture on the box?" she suggested, not looking up. "Of course, the box." I studied the picture of the finished bookshelf. Okay, I could visualize it now. I grabbed 2 panels that looked like the sides and tried to attach one of the shelves. I fumbled with a tiny Allen key that seemed designed to inflict maximum pain on human fingers. The screw went in crooked. I tried to force it. The cheap particle board splintered. A small, frustrated sound escaped my lips. "You're supposed to put the little wooden pegs in first," Maya said from the couch. I whipped my head around. "I know that. I was just checking the alignment." I wasn't. I had completely forgotten about the wooden pegs. I spent another hour trying to fit the pieces together. Nothing lined up. The entire structure was wobbly and unstable. My back ached. I had a splinter in my thumb. My pristine living room was a disaster zone of cardboard, plastic wrap, and failed construction. Finally, I sank to the floor, defeated. The half-assembled bookshelf leaned against the wall at a drunken angle, a monument to my failure. Maya finally sat up and looked at the mess. She didn't say Dad could have done this in 20 minutes. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed it. I looked at the crooked shelf, then at my daughter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a tremor of genuine doubt. My theories were beautiful. My ideals were pure. But in the real world, the bookshelf was still in pieces, and my daughter was drifting further and further away. The bookshelf sat there for days, a crooked skeleton of failure in my otherwise perfect living room. I eventually paid a handyman to come and assemble it properly while Maya was at school. When she got home, she just looked at it, then looked at me, and said nothing. The silence was an accusation. I tried to regain the offensive. I told her the handyman was a struggling small business owner and that by hiring him, we were participating in community uplift. I used all my best coaching language, leveraging resources, delegating tasks, valuing one's own time. It sounded hollow, even to my own ears. The incident had created a rift between us, a new and dangerous quiet. She was polite but distant. She answered my questions with single words. She spent more and more time in her room with the door closed. My home, my sanctuary, started to feel like a Cold War battleground. I knew I was losing her. I was losing her to his world of simple, tangible things. I had to do something drastic. I decided to attack the problem at its source, her perception of her father. I needed to show her that his brand of masculinity wasn't strong. It was fragile. It was a performance. One evening, a week or so later, I sat down with her on the couch. I tried to make it casual. "You know," I began, "it's interesting how society teaches men that their only value is in what they can do with their hands." Maya didn't look up from her phone. "Huh?" "Your father, for instance. He feels this immense pressure to be the fixer. It's a very restrictive role. I'm sure he's secretly very insecure about it." She finally looked at me, a deep frown on her face. "Dad's not insecure." "Oh, but he is, honey. It's called toxic masculinity. Men are taught to suppress their emotions and express themselves through action because they're afraid of being seen as weak. Fixing things is just a way to avoid feeling things." I was weaving a narrative, trying to reframe her hero as a victim. "Dad feels things," she said, her voice low. "He just doesn't talk about it all the time." "Exactly, because he's been conditioned not to. It's actually very sad. I want you to understand that true strength is emotional vulnerability, not knowing how to use a wrench." She stood up, her jaw set. "You're wrong," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You just don't like him because he's not like you." She turned and walked to her room, shutting the door firmly behind her. I was left sitting on the couch, stunned. She had never spoken to me like that before. My attempt to expose his weakness had only made her more defensive of him. I had pushed her even further away. The following week was a tense truce. We moved around each other, speaking only when necessary. I was starting to feel a gnawing sense of desperation. I had no idea how to get my daughter back. My theories, my books, my seminars, none of them had a chapter on this. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday, I think, sometime in the fall because it was cold and raining outside. I was woken up around 2 a.m. by a noise, a strange rhythmic gushing sound. I got out of bed, my heart starting to beat a little faster. The sound was coming from the hallway. I opened my bedroom door and my bare feet stepped into an inch of ice-cold water. I gasped. The gushing sound was louder now, coming from the main bathroom. I waded through the dark hallway, my mind struggling to catch up. In the bathroom, the scene was chaos. Water was pouring out from the flexible hose connecting the toilet tank to the wall. Not dripping, but gushing out with serious pressure, like a fire hose. The floor was a shallow lake, and the water was already seeping under the door into the rest of the apartment. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. My first instinct was to grab towels. I threw every towel we owned onto the floor. They were saturated in seconds, useless. The water level was rising. I remembered something about a shut-off valve. I knelt down, plunging my arms into the cold water, fumbling behind the toilet. I found a small wheel-like knob. I tried to turn it. It wouldn't budge. It was corroded, frozen in place. I twisted with all my strength, my fingers slipping on the wet metal. It didn't move a millimeter. Maya appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom? What's happening?" "It's okay, honey. It's just a leak. Go back to bed." A blatant lie. This was not a leak. This was a flood. "We should call Dad," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. My entire body went rigid. No, absolutely not. I would rather let this entire apartment turn into a swimming pool than call him. Calling him would be the ultimate admission of defeat. It would prove him right. It would prove her right. It would validate his entire primitive worldview in one single, humiliating phone call. "We are not calling your father," I snapped, my voice shrill with panic. "I am perfectly capable of handling this." I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I wouldn't call him, but I wouldn't be a hypocrite either. I wouldn't try to fix it myself after the bookshelf disaster. I would do what I said a civilized person does. I would call a professional. But it couldn't be just any professional. It had to be the right professional. I frantically typed "female plumber near me" into the search bar. My screen was slick with water. My search results were a mess. Finally, I found one. A promising name. Something like the Goddess Wrench Collective. Their website was all about empowering women in the trades and providing sustainable, eco-friendly plumbing solutions. Perfect. This was perfect. This wasn't just a repair. It was a political statement. I found their emergency number and dialed. A calm, recorded voice answered. "Thank you for calling the Goddess Wrench Collective. Our business hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. If this is an after-hours emergency, please leave a detailed message, and one of our technicians will get back to you at the start of the next business day." The next business day. That was 7 hours away. I looked at the water, which was now creeping into the living room, threatening my expensive rug. In 7 hours, my downstairs neighbors would be calling the fire department. I hung up, a wave of hopelessness washing over me. Maya was still standing in the doorway, watching me. Her expression wasn't scared anymore. It was knowing. She was watching my ideology crumble in real time. "Mom," she said again, her voice soft but firm, "just call him." "No," I shouted, the word echoing in the water-logged hallway. "We will find another way." But there was no other way. I knew it. She knew it. Maya turned without another word and went back to her room, closing the door. Good, I thought. At least she's out of the way while I figure this out. I desperately searched for another 24-hour emergency plumber, my principles dissolving with every passing second. Every number I called went to an answering machine or a service that said they couldn't have anyone out for at least an hour. An hour. The water was already over my ankles. Maybe 15 minutes passed. It felt like an eternity. Then I heard a knock on the front door. A solid, firm knock. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. I waded through my ruined apartment to the front door, my mind racing. Who could possibly be here at this hour? I opened the door, and there he was. Dean. He was wearing work boots, jeans, and a jacket thrown over a t-shirt. His hair was messy, like he had just rolled out of bed. In one hand, he held a large, heavy-duty toolbox. He didn't look at me. His eyes went past me, scanning the flooded hallway, assessing the situation with a quick, professional glance. He heard the sound of the gushing water from the bathroom. He didn't say hello. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask what happened. He just walked past me, his boots sloshing through the water, and headed directly for the source of the problem. I stood by the open door, paralyzed. Maya appeared from her room. She had her phone in her hand. She had gone behind my back. She had called him. Dean was already in the bathroom. I heard a metallic clank as he opened his toolbox. I followed him, standing helplessly in the doorway. He had a flashlight in his mouth, pointing the beam at the back of the toilet. He took out a huge, industrial-looking wrench. He put it on the shut-off valve that I couldn't move. He braced himself. There was a loud groan of protesting metal, and then a solid, satisfying thunk. The gushing sound stopped, instantly. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of dripping water. He hadn't even broken a sweat. He took the flashlight out of his mouth and got to work on the broken hose, moving with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic. He didn't need instructions. He didn't need a seminar. He just knew what to do. I stood there, useless, watching him single-handedly save my home. My theories, my blog posts, my empowerment speeches, they were all just words, hot air. In the face of a real crisis, they were worth less than the wrench in his hand. He was a man of action in a world of consequences. I was a woman of words in a world of ideas. And right now, my ideas were all underwater. Maya came and stood beside me. She didn't look at me either. She watched her father. Her expression was one of pure, uncomplicated admiration. It took him maybe 20 minutes to replace the broken hose with a new, heavy-duty one he had in his toolbox. He tested it. No leaks. The crisis was over. He packed his tools away, closing the box with a final, decisive click. He stood up and walked past me, heading for the front door. He still hadn't said a single word to me. His silence was more damning than any insult he could have hurled. It said, "You are not relevant to this situation." At the door, he finally paused and turned. He looked at Maya. "It's all fixed," he said, his voice quiet. "Try and get some sleep." He was about to leave, and then my daughter did something that broke me completely. She ran to her bedroom. I thought she was going to get a blanket or something. She came back out with her school backpack, already packed. She walked right up to her father. "I'm going to stay with you for a few days," she said, "until Mom gets this cleaned up." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. She was choosing. She was choosing him. Dean looked from her face to mine. For the first time, he met my eyes. There was no triumph in his expression, no smug satisfaction, just a deep, weary sadness. He nodded once, then put his hand on Maya's shoulder. Together, they walked out the door. It clicked shut behind them, leaving me alone. I stood there in the middle of my dark, silent, flooded apartment. My beautiful, minimalist sanctuary was a ruin, and I was completely, utterly alone. The only sound was the slow, steady drip of water from the ceiling. A sound like a clock, ticking away the moments of my spectacular, self-inflicted defeat.